The real-time strategy genre has struggled to bring together two key elements for years. Number one, retaining the roots of classic RTS, and number two, making RTS accessible to build and maintain a larger player base. I think it's no secret that these two things are at odds with each other. Developers have been trying to solve the correct way to intertwine these for quite a long time, with no title capturing it since StarCraft 2. To cut through the noise on this topic straight up, it comes down to a tension between different generations of users. One speaks the gaming language of the genre. The other doesn't, but more importantly, it doesn't see the reward in learning it. Can a real-time strategy game be made for both? Those of us who have played them in the past don't remember what it's like to not speak the language of the genre. Boxing a group of units and right-clicking to move them seems like the simplest thing to me and you, but not to folks who don't speak the language. The language of real-time strategy is like Latin. It's a dead language, but people know about its historical and foundational importance. There are certain phrases we all know, like Carpe Diem, seize the day, but we don't actually care to learn Latin, just like many gamers know what a Zerg Rush is, but aren't that interested in playing real-time strategy. So then how do we help someone learn the language who initially has a negative gut response to the genre? And how do we not lose the existing fanbase by overly appealing to a newer generation of gamers? Well, maybe you don't, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, I think this insistence on intertwining these has resulted in a genre and community with an ongoing identity crisis as we ask new releases to be too many things. Have you ever noticed how the popular iterations of real-time strategy use a fraction of the mechanics that existed in the early days of the genre? It's a really interesting and unique position to be, where it's been in an iterative de-evolution over the years. We started with most of the mechanics and complexity first, and then the simpler pieces came later in the form of MOBAs, auto-battlers, tower defense, others. These genres have defined themselves so distinctly now that it seems that we've forgotten where they came from. We even balk at the idea that they could be considered real-time strategy at their core. Where a classic RTS demands more prioritization, these subgenres pull one or two of those tasks from the stack, removing some of the pressure of picking what to do when, which allows the player to then focus on what makes those specific elements fun. So let's talk more about when all of those pieces are kept together as a core RTS, and the importance that it has on modern games and development. There's a rigidity to the existing communities around the core elements of real-time strategy. Countless times we see comments expressing how something is not RTS enough, or how certain elements don't belong in RTS. And yet, what is real-time strategy is a surprisingly difficult question to answer, because depending on who you talk to, it can be apples and oranges. And I know what you're thinking, which is, surely we can agree on some fundamental things, right? Well, okay, but to do that, we have to take a big step back and talk about words. Broadly speaking, words are used for the convenience of understanding ideas. We made them up. We live in a society and all that. It's all very complicated. Many words and phrases act as language buckets, and are less about hard and fast rules about what something is allowed to be. Rather, they draw a spiderweb of sorts, which connects concepts that light up when you think about the phrase. At best, we can say the thing in question probably or typically is related to a certain number of these concepts. With that in mind, when I say real-time strategy, you don't think of a dictionary definition. Instead, you're probably picturing adjacent concepts. Omniscient viewport, harvesters, APM, rally points, build and destroy, research, base building, esports, minimap, unit micromanagement, etc., you get the point. Again, many of these may overlap with other genres, and some may also defy each other outright. What lights up in your mind first probably has to do with what games you played as a child. Certain games probably light up enough of these adjacent concepts in your mind, even if we can point out how they technically lack a lot of the others, and therefore, should they not be considered RTS? The easiest, most well-known example probably being Dawn of War 2, where you have no base building or harvesting in the entire campaign. Love it or hate it, you know it when you see it, and Dawn of War 2 is real-time strategy. Our brains do that automatically. And not stopping to examine how we think about what real-time strategy is has led to a level of over-intellectualized inflexibility. It feels like new releases are walking on eggshells so their ideas don't appear to overstep these definitional boundaries that we've set. My point with all of this is to show how there's no set-in-stone definition of any game genre. More like fuzzy lines that are in somewhat different places for different people. But at the end of the day, we know what someone means in a general sense when they say real-time strategy, and that's sort of all that matters. For veterans of the genre, we need to be pushing back against any appeals to a dictionary definition. The honest answer to what is real-time strategy is, I'll know it when I see it, but you might also be seeing something different than the person next to you. And that's because traditional RTS titles are actually much more different from each other than they are similar. For example, the gap between Total Annihilation and Warcraft 3 is titanic. At a glance, these games aren't related at all, but what made them both foundational to the same genre wasn't the shared mechanics they strictly adhered to. The genre has historically been at its best when titles were adding to that bucket of concepts or amplifying one or two parts into something new. StarCraft said, sure, we've already got some asymmetry, but how about more asymmetry? Age of Empires said, we've already got some economy, but how about more economy? Command & Conquer said, here's Tim Curry being a weirdo.
Space!
We've all assigned different weights of enjoyment to these areas of innovation depending on their impact on each of us in our formative years. That being said, it's no wonder developers today have a heck of a time figuring out how to evolve the genre when we rarely agree on what we liked about it in the first place. Many individual elements that have proven to be popular spin-offs are hand-waved away for being too different, too casual for RTS. And yet we anxiously await that new esports hit, a narratively compelling campaign that gets rave reviews and a flourishing custom community, all of which requires an active effort to appeal to new players. Why oh why can no studio give this to us? It's because we, the players, have trapped real-time strategy in this strange liminal box where we demand every title meet every conflicting expectation, to be both too old and too new, for the ultra-casual and highly competitive players alike, for a macro-heavy and micro-heavy experience. All of these can be great, some can be mixed to a degree, but I think it's time to accept the dissonance that exists and ask games to pick their lane instead of driving in the middle of the road. Company of Heroes 3 is an example of a pretty good game all things considered, but because it takes half measures in its design decisions, many negative reviews boil down to questioning why we should even bother switching from Company of Heroes 2 after 10 long years in development. Devs hear players want something new, but not too new, and that line has proven near impossible to find. In their search for it, we've gotten milquetoast solutions that have struggled again and again to live up to the talk around modern real-time strategy and how it can recapture its popularity. On the other end of the spectrum, I'd ask folks to unapologetically make that classic RTS. But this time, let's skip asking how to make it a thriving esports scene with a ton of new players. Recognize from the start that anyone not speaking the genre language isn't going to be learning it through your specific game, and that's okay. New Blood Interactive makes some incredible first-person shooter throwbacks, and the community loves and supports games like Dusk and Amid Evil because everyone knows exactly what they're trying to be. Why can't we accept new RTS games being a similar throwback without expecting something that explodes in popularity? We expect too much and then are disappointed every time, as plenty of pretty decent indie titles have fallen to the wayside and the community at large pays no mind. Five Nations is a delightful game that harkens to the RTS genre of old. It has 56 campaign maps, a map editor, and PvP matchmaking. It has its share of technical problems, but ultimately it's solid and accomplishes what it sets out to do. It's good, but I wouldn't say it's great, and as such, I've seen very little talk about it. For some reason, we can't be happy with a pure throwback. The reason we do this is we hold these games to the standards of smash hits of the past. It's not normal to have an active community after 20 years, and yet if we don't see a new project matching that absurd potential, then we don't bother putting in any effort talking about or even trying these games. We've been waiting for the next top-streamed game like in the glory days. But how would we even get there? We'd have to make RTS accessible to build and maintain a player base. Bring us back from the brink, as it were. Look, the primary piece of this is recognizing who the real bulk of the existing player base even is. While there are many active fans passionate about the esports scene, they're not the majority of players, nor do they drive revenue. Maybe they could with the right game and monetization strategies, but there are no success stories post-StarCraft 2. I point you to Giant Grant Games' video about why the next major RTS will fail. He looks at Steam achievements data for PvP matches played, and pulls a Dustin Browder interview where he says 80% of the player base of StarCraft 2 never even touched 1v1. We marvel at esports pros, but that doesn't translate to wanting to actually buy the game to compete for most of us. We bought StarCraft because it looked and sounded cool, maybe after our friends were talking about it. Brood War in Korea was cultural lightning in a bottle. You can't formulaically recapture that. In many ways, StarCraft 2 took the wrong lessons from Brood War with such a focus on competitive play, but it aligned with an online cultural transformation towards live streaming. You can't pick and choose when that happens, though. Don't get me wrong, these are both excellent games, but they also tapped into a lot of luck that was unique to their time. We'd all agree that the answer to popularity is just make a good game. But what the landscape considers a good game is sometimes outside of the designer's control. The best they can do is make something that can seize opportunity when it presents itself. Both StarCrafts undeniably did this exceptionally well, but many other RTS scenes tried to follow in their competitive design footsteps without examining the context surrounding them and then ended up down a fruitless path. If we're serious about building a new generation of players, then we need to be asking them, the people currently not playing, people who stopped after the campaigns, people who've never touched the genre, not just the veterans of the existing player base. Contact influencers and variety creators from other genres to get their feedback on what it feels like to play RTS. Get focus testers with a variety of backgrounds. Give new players proper gateways to learning the language, and eventually they too can be fluent. We need to be asking, in what basic ways does RTS activate our dopaminergic reward centers? Because there's a lot of competition out there. Winning in a competitive PvP environment has shown to be for the minority. Embrace those more casual subgenres. Fold them back in. Let's see what we can learn to ease players into the more intense multitasking and prioritization that we have been told, loud and clear, is too much to be thrust into. Look no further than the king of casual mode, StarCraft 2 Co-op. It was a sleeper hit, unexpected to take off, but when it did, it was leaned into successfully. Stukov is partially an auto-battler commander, while Tychus has you controlling a very small hero squad. Beyond that, we can look at custom games like Direct Strike or an indie title like Buggos. I played through Buggos over a weekend and had a blast. What caught my eye initially was the creator advertising on the real-time strategy subreddit. Quote, "If you're old like me and enjoy a relaxed RTS, give it a look." This game is mostly an auto-battler, and many will write it off because of that. Yet it's mechanics like these that actually provide accessibility, and a low-stakes opportunity to learn the language of real-time strategy in a much more relaxed environment. And you know what? I adored this game. It's not perfect, nor is it particularly complex, but it does what it does really well. Does a game need to fully automate everything to make it casual enough? Probably not. But we need to treat this topic seriously and not be scared from the pushback about what a real RTS is if we truly want to solve how to teach the language to brand new players. Buggos and many titles like it cannot be the full future of real-time strategy, but they can be a contribution to it rather than disregarded like some distant cousin we'd rather not associate with because it's merely an auto-battler. I see several new promising games in development with communities fervently talking about many of these issues. I think I'll enjoy these games, but that may be because I have no grandiose expectations. I generally know what I like. It doesn't matter to me if it's popular or not. Many others seem to expect a release that continues to tout mechanics that are demonstrably unpopular to somehow magically sprout a flourishing scene. When that fails to materialize, they're surprised Pikachu and ask the same question. How do we get more people to play? Ultimately, today's landscape is just different, and that's a reality we all have to face. I think devs already have, but in response to the wrong signals. It's no longer 2000, and it's no longer 2010. The market for consumer attention continues to get exponentially more competitive. If you don't want to move too far from the roots of the genre, then own it. Own that real-time strategy is a niche in the current diaspora of gaming, rather than the cornerstone it used to be. People still like it, but you probably won't be growing the genre's market share. On the other hand, if you want to iterate RTS in your game, own it. Own that you're making big changes and not taking half measures. Market your game appropriately and don't get scared when the other side of the community tries to come down on you. I think if each RTS release can decide what it wants to be and not so desperately straddle that line, we'd get fewer entries like Company of Heroes 3 or Age of Empires 4, which gave us half-baked smatterings of things rather than doing one or two specifics really well. If we see games owning their identity, both currently and in the future, then it falls on us, the players, who need to be willing to accept those games for what they are, rather than trying to pull them in conflicting directions. In this hypothetical environment, we support different games that appeal to different groups. The newer groups then learn the language, and then they can graduate into what they used to think was super scary stuff. This is the reality of how we need to populate the RTS community in the modern age. Does real-time strategy even need saving? Yeah, but probably only from ourselves. It's time to stop expecting one single game to do it all for us. Alright, whew, unscripted Jaberino here to just wing it for the outro. If you're a regular to my channel, then you probably know that I make videos for fun, it's a hobby of mine, and I don't do this for work. So a project like this was a huge undertaking for me. This is the first piece of long-form edited content that I've ever made. It was incredibly time-consuming, but I'm really proud of myself that I was finally able to see it through, because it's something that's been on my mind for a really long time. So I hope you liked it. At the very least, I hope it was thought-provoking. I'd really appreciate it if you left your opinions in the comments section. Also, if you liked it, hit the like button. It's the easiest way you can help me out. If you are new here, you can go to my channel and check the playlists, where I have playthroughs of tons and tons of different custom campaigns for StarCraft and Warcraft in particular. Hundreds at this point. Tons and tons of content still being made today. We see some really, really cool stuff. So if those games interest you, definitely check those out. Alright, that's it for me. Thanks again, everyone, so much for watching. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.